We don't do aristocracy in this country, and we have forgotten the radicalism of the American experiment. Now, interestingly enough, people have a lot of time to think about these things right now. And the stark underbelly of American society is revealed for all to see.
Just be happy with who you are.
Can I start with, and this might be a bit of an unorthodox question, but how much did you know about Dave Rubin before your interview with him?
Nothing about him.
Nothing at all? Like that was, you just walked in there and that was the first time you had spoken to him or anything?
Yes.
And what were your impressions once you had started the interview?
Well, he was polite to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that more and more as campaigns progress, you're aware whether or not somebody's giving you a fair shot. So I disagreed with him on some things, but he wasn't unkind to me. So
I thought you came across as amazing in that, though. There was so many moments that I'm also speaking as someone who has a long and sordid history with kind of analyzing his work, shall I say, to put it candidly. To hear someone to be able to speak so many moments, like the discussion about reparations and slavery,
yeah,
for example.
Was, we're living at a time when far too many people either don't remember what they learned in American history classes or never learned what they should have learned. We have 11 states in the United States that don't even require half a year of American history, civics, or government. Now, I'm not saying that about Dave,
mm-hmm.
but I am saying that the conversation about slavery did seem so disconnected from historical facts that I was more amazed than anything else. Like, have you read anything? I don't know. But he was lovely on a personal level. So,
mm-hmm. No, absolutely. What were your impressions going through the entire process, from being on the world stage to actually being able to, I guess, debate some of these figures? Was it surreal? Did you feel that it was a very beneficial experience for you?
It was certainly something deeply beneficial in the sense that I'm certainly glad I did it. But it was I would say, a pretty equal mix of exhilaration and brutality. What was exhilarating was talking to the American people. I was deeply impressed by voters, particularly in the primary states, in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. People in the primary states are very aware of how important their choices are, how important the decision of who they will vote for in that primary. And I found people there, for the most part, very aware of the issues, very emotionally and psychologically sober about the importance of their choice, and willing to kick the tires in all the good ways, ask tough questions. I was reminded of Jefferson's comment that the only safe repository for power is in the hands of the people. So I, because of that experience, came away deeply convinced that if we would just leave it to the voters, if you would just let democracy handle this, then I don't think Trump would have ever become president, and I don't think he would be reelected. On the other hand, there is another simultaneous reality. I call it the political media industrial complex. And that matrix of power does less to facilitate democracy, which I believe should be its sole responsibility, and in many ways more to manipulate it and dictate it even. And that I found disturbing. And then, of course, I myself was personally at the effect of it in terms of how I was treated. So I saw the dark underbelly of the way the system operates, but I also saw the very bright high side of democracy when we allow it to actually occur.
Did you feel personally that Trump and his election was a sign, like a symptom, rather than the cause?
Oh, definitely, I feel that, and I said that throughout my campaign. We had been in a devolutionary arc regarding American democracy ever since the 1980s. With the advent of trickle-down economics and this ridiculous theory proffered and backed by billions of dollars, convincing the American people that if you have this major transfer of wealth into the hands of the stockholder class, that that's going to be great because all that money will trickle down and it will lift all boats. Well, I think after 40 years, it's very clear that has not occurred. It has left millions of people without even a life vest. We have 1% of our population controlling more wealth than the bottom 90%. And that is not just data. That is not just facts or statistics. Those are human lives we're talking about. Tens of millions of people who live with chronic daily tension and economic anxiety because they don't know what will happen if they get sick, and they don't know what will happen if their children get sick. They don't know how they will send their kids to college. They don't know how they will ever get out from under these college loans. So then we have all these resultant social pathologies and dysfunctions that emerge from that. And then we keep trying to treat the symptoms rather than treating the underlying cause, challenging the underlying cause, which is a systemic economic injustice, which has now become entrenched with the way not only our economy operates, but with the way our government operates as well.
Did you feel that that kind of messaging was coming from Bernie Sanders, and did that inspire you in any way? Because you guys have very similar, I guess.
Yeah.
In
terms of the externals, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I was a big supporter of Bernie last time.
Mm-hmm.
I feel moved to bring the conversation into some areas where Bernie was not. I feel very strongly about waging peace. And the need to proactively wage peace, which is why I had a plan for a Department of Peace. That plan, of course, a plan such as that has been around for a while. I also feel very strongly about the chronic trauma of America's children. We have 13 million hungry children. I'm not saying that any of these things were things Bernie would necessarily disagreed with, but where my emphasis lay, which is why I want a Department of Children and Youth. You know, children aren't old enough to vote. So they're not a constituency for a politician, and they're not old enough to work, so they don't have any financial leverage. And in a country such as we have today, where there is such undue influence, financial influence, particularly of major money, corporate money, on our politicians, what chance do children have? They can't vote, they don't have any financial leverage, and as a consequence, politicians in America, the political establishment, knows it can get away with giving very little beyond lip service to a population of Americans that are citizens. We have 13 million hungry children in the United States. This is the richest country in the world. We have millions of American children who go to school every day in classrooms that don't even have the adequate school supplies to teach a child to read. And if a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased. The chances of incarceration are drastically increased. Where do you think these kids are going to be in 20 years? That's the population. Our prison population is made up. A majority of prisoners in the U.S. Prison system were traumatized children, and even violently so. So I wanted to, and I still want to, have a conversation that I think goes beyond some of the more external policy issues that are talked about to some of the psychological and emotional connections that I believe can really touch people's conscience and make the difference in getting things to change.
And I think that in this day and age, especially like maybe one of the biggest victories to come from everything that Bernie Sanders has done is that I feel like class consciousness is something that's been awakened, especially in a large generation of Americans. But I also am of the mind that things just seem to be getting worse, right? Like the concentration of wealth is going further and further into the hands of the few. Do you see from someone who's been, I guess, at the front lines of the whole political game, do you see there being any chance of salvaging this, or at least trying to go into an opposite direction?
Long term, yes. Short term, we're in terrible trouble. The system that you just described is also expressing itself in the way it's handling the pandemic. It reminds me of the movie The Titanic, when the rich people from upstairs came and locked the doors in the steerage level so that the poor people couldn't get out. It is obscene. It is morally obscene to me. The way with our coronavirus stimulus and bailout right now, we are spending billions of dollars bailing out huge corporate entities without even any requirements that they pay their workers. And meanwhile, millions and millions of people who already were at a point. We already had 40% of our population that could not afford a $400 unexpected expenditure. Well, that day of the $400 unexpected expenditure has now come and gone. And the crumbs that have been thrown to people in as a so-called bailout is an example of the entrenched economic injustice which led to this point. Given the way this campaign season has gone so far, I certainly do not feel we're in trouble. Yeah. But I think the first thing we need to do is to make sure we have to do first things first. I see the problem with the political parties and the political media matrix that I was talking about. I liken that to two broken arms and two broken legs. But I see President Trump's agenda and his personality, unfortunately, and his power as a bullet near the heart of American democracy. So we have to take first things first. First thing we have to do is to make sure that the president is denied a second term. After that, though, then we have to take on your question in a very big way. The Democratic Party over the last few years has practically eviscerated the real political teeth, political power of the American left. First, we have to make sure Trump does not win. We have to vote blue. After that, once this election is over, there will be much to discuss among those of us who feel that the political power of the progressive movement in the United States should actually match its numbers.
Do you think that there's enough progressive parts of the current Joe Biden platform to be able to reach out to people who feel disillusioned by all that? Or do you feel that if there is the opportunity for that administration to take hold, that we'll have more leeway, I guess, to push up against him? Because I mean, I would agree that we have nothing against Trump. There's nothing the left can do against Trump except try to stop him from eroding everything that is left, right?
Mm-hmm. The answer to that question has got to come from Joe Biden. We'll see. I think he has the emotional magnanimity that is called for. But whether on the level of policy, he will be open to the kinds of genuine policy positions that will be attractive enough to gain voter traction among a population that clearly he needs in the election, that will be up to him. I certainly hope that he will. I certainly hope that he will.
What could disillusioned voters do outside of the election itself? What is your strategy in terms of messaging right now?
There are a lot of down ballot candidates. You know, we have to deal with congressional seats. There are 435 people who are voting, who are running for the House of Representatives, and of course there are Senate races all over the country as well. Mitch McConnell, for instance, after Trump, nobody's a more important figure to deal with than Mitch McConnell. The establishment Democrats are going with Amy McGrath. Mitch McConnell has raised about $17 million. She's raised around $16 million. But remember, a lot of her money comes from outside Kentucky. My favorite in that race for the Democratic nomination to defeat McConnell, which once again could not be more important, is a man named Mike Broyhier. This is the way it goes in Kentucky. The Democrats do well in Lexington and in Louisville. The places where McConnell keeps getting an edge over us and why he continues to win is in rural Kentucky. Now, Amy McGrath is an attractive candidate in many ways. She's the chosen corporatist Democratic choice. And she is an ex-Marine, which I greatly admire. So is Mike. Mike also is an ex-Marine. The difference here is Mike is also a farmer. So I believe Mike's ability to really get down and speak to the farmer and rural Kentuckians in a way that does not come across patronizing and arrogant is extremely important. And so everybody really needs to look very, very deeply. When it comes to the presidential election, just vote blue, vote blue, vote blue. Ultimately, vote blue on all of these races. But remember, we still are in primaries on these congressional races and the senatorial. I have on my site, Marianne2020.com, because I'm still Marianne and it's still 2020. I have a list of progressive candidates that I hope people will look at and support in any way that you can. It's really important. So once again, there are three co-equal branches of government, as we know. It's not just the president where power matters.
I'm just totally curious. Are you supporting Shahid?
I'm sorry, who?
Shahid Buttar. He's up against Nancy Pelosi, I think.
Yeah, I thought that's who you were talking about. I don't want to go there. My heart is not telling me to go there. Actually, no. I think perhaps there's some issues. I'm an American woman, and I don't have to agree with Nancy Pelosi about everything to feel that she's paved the way. Mm-hmm. A lot of us, and I'm loyal to that.
You were talking a bit about the coronavirus and its effect, I guess, on both the American people and the American consciousness. How much of that do you feel? Because I know Donald Trump is getting blamed, and obviously he should be, rightly so, for his complete debacle in handling this. But at the same time, there's also that element of this is basically uprooting a lot of the problems with the current system it is. I don't have to go as deep and as going like, this is capitalism, but like, just basically the private and for-profit health insurance system of the United States, stuff like that. Like at what point is it just Donald Trump and this is how bad he's done it, but this was a disaster waiting to happen in a lot of ways.
Correct. And not only is it a disaster waiting to happen, but there are other disasters waiting to happen. This time it was a pandemic. It could just as easily have been a nuclear disaster. It could just as easily have been a weather catastrophe. Because in those areas, just as in the area of pandemics, we have been skating on very thin ice. What does that mean? As you certainly realize, there needs to be a balance. And when we're at our best, we strike that balance between government protecting individual liberty, including economic liberty, and concern and care and guarantee for the safety of the common good. But what has happened ever since the 1980s, particularly for reasons that we talked about a couple minutes ago, there has been such a massive transfer, not just of wealth, but of resources and advocacy on the part of the government into the hands of the small few for the purposes of their short-term profit, as opposed to public investment in things that take care of the public good. What they have done is they will do just the bare minimum they need in case a catastrophe occurs. What happened here was it wasn't just a catastrophe, it's an entire systems failure. And it's not only our healthcare system that is not set up to take care of this. It's many of the systems related to that. We had 47 pandemic centers, 37 of them had been closed. There is a man, I don't know if you've ever had him on your show, but you might be interested in this book if you haven't read it. It's called The Fifth Risk by Michael Lewis. He was the one who wrote The Big Short. Have you read it?
No, I haven't. I said I'm going to write that down. Michael Lewis. Yeah,
The Fifth Risk by Michael Lewis. And he's the one who wrote The Big Short. He is profoundly hip to what happens. Now,
I do know The Big Short, yeah.
Yeah, same person.
Okay.
Now, this book was written before the coronavirus, the COVID pandemic. However, it shows the way the U.S. government has over the years, but particularly with Trump's, withdrawn resources to the very agencies and the very projects and the very processes that care for people just in case something were to occur. And of course, something occurred, and we have not been set up in such a way as to do really much more than protect the few at the expense of the many.
What would the messaging be in terms of like, this is some things that we have to change immediately? Like there's no time to waste, right? Because as the world is transforming so quickly right now, especially with this, the coronavirus epidemic and everything, I feel that this could fundamentally change society as a whole. Like there's no going back. And I mean, what direction and how do we move into something that I guess would be better for the people, for lack of a better expression?
This will change society, but that doesn't necessarily mean in a bad way. We're at choice. This pandemic has rocked us to our core. But in a very real way, we needed to be rocked to our core for all the reasons that we've talked about already. The system, we were headed towards disaster. We had been too close to the cliff for a very long time. The very way we have organized our society has been bowing down to this false god of short-term profit for huge corporate entities, this aristocracy. It's like people forgot we fought an American Revolution. We fought against a king. We fought against an aristocracy for that reason. A small matrix of corporate aristocrats. This country does not belong to them. It belongs to the people. So whether they're health insurance companies, big pharmaceutical companies, drug manufacturers, the gun manufacturers, food companies, agricultural companies, defense contractors, oil and gas companies. We don't do aristocracy in this country. And we have forgotten the radicalism of the American experiment. Now, interestingly enough, people have a lot of time to think about these things right now. And the stark underbelly of American society is revealed for all to see. You know, many millions of people were on economic lockdown for all intents and purposes before this even happened. Mm-hmm. And Americans are having to look with horror at the way things really work in America. And this is, I believe, what we need. We need to look in the mirror as a nation, and we need to look in the mirror as citizens. And we stand at a choice point. We will either go in a more authoritarian direction, and those forces that represent that authoritarian direction are at work as we speak. They're already using this opportunity to get even more environmental regulations, et cetera, or we will now head down the road in a more enlightened, aspirational direction. Listen, my country has made huge, our country, you said you live in Canada. I don't know if you're a Canadian or from the United States.
Yes.
Okay, so, you know, we had slavery in this country. It's not like this country has never done terrible things. We have done very terrible things. We had suppression of women. We had slavery. We had institutionalized white supremacy in the American South. However, our historical trend is that we tend ultimately to self-correct. We answered slavery with abolition. We answered suppression of women with women's suffrage. We answered segregation with the civil rights movement. It's simply our turn. It's time for our generation to rise up. We've never done it perfectly, but we are very off course now, and we have to do what other generations have done, which is get us back on track to at least the bare minimum of being who we say we are. And we can do that, but it's going to take work, and it does have to begin with the elections in November. Everybody has to be involved. God help us if that does not go well.
Hey you, yes, you. Do you like cozy environments with other wholesome people? Well then come join the Discord. It's got a whole bunch of stuff to help you with creative endeavors, such as stock footage, royalty-free music, and an amazing community of people looking to help each other out and uplift your content. Join the Discord now by going to weareserfs.com. That's weareserfs.com.
We would like to thank Miranda Marone. You are our monarch, and we thank you for our indentured servitude. We would like to thank our lords, Ricky Pilgrim, I'm Raft, Michaela Schmid, Tomospin, Farrer Tahone. You are all the pillars of our organization. To our Knights of the Square Table, Paul Parafit, Daniel Kahn, Clement Chutskoff, Alan R., Josh Mickelson, and Dr. Zayas, Cooper Pilot, Andrea Lynn Epperly, Dylan Bythe, Terry, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. And to our merchants, thank you for taking mercy upon us.